the first thing that you'd see on the agenda for this week is a welcome, is an introduction. So as we had mentioned earlier on, with Carrie's departure in the senior partnership manager position, we've been recruiting to fill the senior partnership manager position. I'm really excited to introduce Margaret, who is here to join us today. So you'll get to hear a little bit from her about her background, what brings her to the role. For context, her role, as a reminder, is similar to Jaren's role, that she'll be interfacing with partnership champions at your schools to help ensure that all the resources that you need, that the program needs on your campus are there to make it successful, and that both College Possible and your schools are working well together to help make this program possible. So I'm going to turn over to Margaret to introduce herself and give you a little bit of context of who she is and welcome her here. So welcome, Margaret.
Thanks, John, and so good to see all your faces, and I hope you're able to hear me without too much feedback. So wonderful to see all your faces and to be part of this great team. So I am still learning a lot about what the Catalyze model looks like and the ways that you support students and the ways that you help colleges. I'm really excited to learn from you and see all of the ways that you are making really big impact. Just to give you sort of really quick nutshell of what brought me to College Possible, I have worked in the college success space, most recently at an organization called Persistence Plus. Persistence Plus is an ed tech startup that is a behavioral nudging platform. So it really was the intersection of social psychology and behavioral economics applied in an intervention of 2 to 3 text messages per week that were sent to college students to help them really feel more connected to their college campuses, to be more planful about their time, and feel more connected to resources. So I was in a director of operations role there and was able to interact with a lot of different colleges, a lot of different types of colleges, a lot of different roles at colleges through this work of behavioral nudging of college students. So that's my most recent work, and that really had me excited about the college success space, which is what led me to Catalyze. Prior to that, I did a master's at the Harvard Graduate School of Education in higher education, and worked in the college textbook publishing industry for years as well. So I've seen higher education from a lot of different angles, and just really excited to be part of this team. So I will be silent and learn more from you. I'm also running on low battery, so I might disappear sometime soon. But good to meet you all.
All right, so again, welcome, Margaret. Really excited to have you join the team. And for coaches, you'll get a chance to get to know Margaret better as we continue on here. You know, she'll be among those who will be present for the mid-year retreat, so a chance to meet in person there, as well as for any of the visits to your campuses that you'd have the opportunity to connect there too. So looking forward to more of that. All right, so I think I'll turn it over to Grace for the next part of our check-in portion today.
Good morning, friends. So I have a couple sort of like independent action item things for you in lieu of a check-in question this morning. So number one is a thing that a lot of you have already done, which I appreciate greatly. And that is filling out the mid-year retreat survey, so we can get a handle on some logistic stuff as we're planning for you to arrive to St. Paul. So that is number one. If you haven't done that yet, please click through and fill that out. And once you have finished that, or if you have already finished that, idealistic leader nomination. So we haven't done this for a couple months, and I would love to give us all the opportunity to celebrate each other. So this week I have the doc or the form in the chat. If you could fill that out, nominate a couple people for being idealistic leaders. And then next week I'll have that PowerPoint ready to go and we can all read through the nominations. So I am going to give y'all until 9:15, which is our regular check-in time, to do both of those action items. But please do prioritize the retreat form if you haven't done that yet. Let me know if you have any questions or issues with the forms. Alrighty, if you want to wrap up any nominations you are currently filling out, we are going to pivot to Think Tank for the day, which is going to be focused on priority coaching. So now that we have 2 weeks left of priority coaching, we want to touch base with peers from other institutions to talk about strategy and what you are being challenged with student situations and any successes you've had with students in the last couple weeks since we've transitioned from fall campaign to priority coaching weeks. We have think tank questions in Absorb. I am linking there now. It's linking to the folder so you can download the December 11th think tank questions. So I'll give y'all a moment to navigate through that and download the document, and then Jake is going to open up the room so you can discuss in a sec. I want to make sure. Let me know if you have any issues downloading the document. I will pause briefly. Can I get a thumbs up if you've downloaded it? Thank you so much, Kersha. Killing it. How about now? Are there additional thumbs? Got a Jenny, got an Allison, got a Marcella, got a Daniel. Beautiful. Okay, I think that is enough people to make sure that at least one person, thank you, Devon, at least one person per group should have the questions now. And on this document, we have reiterated the goals for priority coaching weeks, just to sort of lead your conversation as a reminder that that's where ideally you will be ending up after the last 2 weeks of priority coaching. So I will ask Jake to open up the rooms, and we will be back at probably 9:40-ish. So you all have an opportunity to share out any questions or anything that you think would benefit the rest of the group. Cool. Have a good conversation. Welcome back, everyone. So we have about 15 minutes to share out some main takeaways, questions that you all brought from those discussions. And I am wondering if anyone else is interested besides me in like leading through some discussion and share out stuff, just like going through the questions. I can do it, but you all actually had the conversation. So does anyone want to step up and walk us through the questions and ask for share outs and stuff? There's a lot of construction happening outside of this room. It's very loud.
Sure, I can lead off.
Cool, thanks, Marcella. It's all you. You got till 10.
Cool. So I'm just starting by answering kind of like the first question and then like popcorning it kind of in a way.
That sounds good.
Okay. So I was telling some of my, sorry, Daniel, can you turn it down? No, it's okay. I hear myself through Daniel's computer and I'm like, it's so frustrating. So something that a challenge I've been dealing with one of my students is we've been dealing with trying to locate citizenship documents to verify his record of birth for verification for FAFSA of this present year, not the next year FAFSA. And we have been communicating with the family, and the financial aid office has also been like a real big point person for me and the student of just trying to like try to get to the family and understand like this is really important that you locate these documents that you apparently have lost somewhere. And he's adopted, so it's not like they're just a birth certificate and you can just go to the county court. Like there's a worry that maybe the parents didn't go through the steps that they should have to be able to actually get physical copies and verification of his citizenship. And so we were running into problems when it came around spring registration time, because not only does he have an account balance, he also like has quite a big gap, so she wasn't going to open registration for him. And we did get some stuff figured out, but we're still working on like getting there's a few things that would count to the financial aid office to verify his citizenship. He doesn't have a picture. He doesn't have a photo ID. He doesn't have a social security card. He doesn't have a birth certificate. So like we are very slowly working on trying to figure that out. But we have made I've learned a lot about the process of trying to figure out how to not only locate, but like where to go to kind of start the process of getting verification of his citizenship so we can finally get it to the college. But it's going to be a process. It's not going to be fast by any means, but that's been a challenge that I've been facing this semester. But he is registered. It's just financial aid that we're kind of stopped up on. But yeah, so that's been a challenge that I've been facing this semester with a student. Yeah, so anybody else have something else they want to share? A good thing, maybe? Oh, I have a good thing. Quick. We did a holiday, like Christmas ornament decorating thing for students. And they came in like the week before finals and decorated some really cute little ornaments and hung them on.
Beautiful.
This is the Catalyze tree. Daniel did. Oh, this one's great. Where is it? Here. It has abs if you look really close. Yeah. So that was really fun. We had a lot of students come in and we got to have like little mini campaign coaching sessions with them just because like kind of like under the wraps, we were like, oh yeah, come in to decorate, but we're going to ask you everything. It was great.
I love that. Very festive and strategic.
Sorry, Alana, you were going to go.
Oh no, I'm just muted. But
Sorry, I heard you breathing before and I was like, oh, is she about to go? Sorry.
Any other successes? Otherwise, we can move to our next question.
Anyone
I have
else?
a success.
Yeah, Denisha.
So I had a student come into the office and she was bawling because she thought that she wouldn't make it through the semester, well, to the next semester because of the requirements that CPG and Blue Ash require, basically, long story short. And she didn't do her FAFSA. And long story short, we ended up calling financial aid. And literally all she had to do was approve it or accept it or something. It was literally something so simple. And we figured out that her grades aren't as bad as she thinks. And she'll meet the GPA requirements for CPG and CPAS. And she was fine. So that made my day because she was a mess. Like, it was ridiculous. And yeah, so that made me feel good because I made her smile and she's good now. So yeah.
Warms my heart. That's awesome, Tanisha. Thanks for sharing. I'll leave it open for successes or challenges for a sec if anyone else has some.
So I've mentioned this like to a few different people, but like the whole spring registration thing is real scary at this point. One of my supervisors sent out a spreadsheet last week with like all of the coaching pool students who are registered and who aren't. And at that point, out of my 107 students, 70 of them were not registered for the spring. So for the past week, it's just been like so much outreach and like just texting everyone individually, and like for most of them it's collections holds because they're living in a dorm and that's like $4,000, $5,000. For some of them it's just literally not knowing how to use the system to register for classes, so they've just been kind of like avoiding it. Some of them didn't know that they had to meet with their advisor and couldn't figure out like why they weren't able to register for classes. So I feel like I'm learning a lot about how the institution is kind of not educating certain students, especially first generation students, because the ones that have registered are a little bit more connected and have a little bit more of a network and relatives who have been in college and all of that. So that's been a challenge. Success, I've been kind of catching up on persistence categories after my wedding, so I'm still behind, but yesterday I was going through most of my students, and like this whole time I've been thinking that most of them would be like 3 or 4, and I was seeing a lot more 1s and 2s than I thought, so that made me feel a little bit better.
Anyone else doing anything like finals week wise for students, like self-care or whatever type things? I'm always interested, like the ideas that people come up with.
We're having a hot chocolate and Oreo tabling session, just like outside our office area. And we're also gonna start the raffle or collecting names that day for our raffle, for our financial aid renewal raffle that we're gonna do in the winter, or next semester, I guess.
So I know, like here at Cole, one big thing that we're doing for like everybody during finals week is they're giving out free massage. Sorry, can't talk today. Massages today for students. Plus, we have dog therapy, so like people can come in, pet their dog, like pet these dogs that we get from like St. Luke's, which is like the hospital like right next to us, if they wanted to. So like that's a great little way that we're encouraging our students to go to and like de-stress for finals.
Sharky, that's so cool that you guys do the dog thing, because apparently before Daniel and I's class came in 2014, they like banned dogs being allowed on campus. I don't know, there's like some weird rule that like the college is worried about like liability and that like a dog would like bite somebody. But it was so sad because like it also allowed the Humane Society to kind of like pair with Luther there for a while, and now dogs are allowed on campus. Like people walk their dogs, like community members walk their dogs all the time, but they can't allow like a college sanctioned event anymore about like for having dogs on campus for like finals week stress relievers. And it's the saddest thing ever, because I really, really think that it's like for some people who like aren't away from their homes, like it's like one of the best, like, I don't know, like warming fun activities like ever. Just like hold the dog for a while. I know. I actually think about that. Anahita, I was reading Anahita's comment. She was saying that she's like, you see Daniel in the back of my screen and vice versa. And I always think about that every time. I'm like, that's hilarious.
Can we just pick any question, or did you guys want to go through specific ones? Yeah. All right. How are you leveraging the data from Salesforce, persistent categories, and milestone statuses to inform your priority coaching? This is something that we talked about. Well, I guess I saw a difference with our group. Basically, me having a smaller school, I feel like, and this might just be me, the persistence coaching, priority coaching, I don't feel like I have specific students that are more of a priority. I feel like I'm reaching a lot of students at like the same type of touch, and I'm reaching out and communicating with them on the same level. So it's hard for me to say like, yeah, I've been communicating with this student this week a whole lot. But I don't want to, I guess my biggest thing, I don't want to put priority coaching under most of my students and only have like two students that I don't have as priority, because we don't communicate like that just as a base. Like it's very like, I'm sending you messages, you're saying like, great, I'm okay, we're an update. But yeah, I guess that was different for me because it's a smaller school and I can focus on students. Whereas other bigger schools, you might, really have an opportunity to have priority students or priority coaching.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference with Daniel and I. Is like I felt the same thing when like when we were reaching the end of the fall campaign. I was kind of like, oh, what are priority coaching weeks? And then when I read up on it, I was like, that's what I've been doing all semester. Just because like when you have such a small cohort, like you're reaching out all at the same time. There might be some students you're touching base with like a little bit more because of like a certain problem. But like I even tried priority lists for a while, but I was like, I don't even need to do that. I can reach to all my students in a day pretty easily. Like 17's not that many students. So like just for my cohort. So it's like, oh, so that's what's kind of interesting about how the campaign works really, really well for like people who have full loads. And now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we just do the same thing all year round, which is nice, but it'll be very different. I think we've talked as a team, like how different that'll be once our cohort keeps growing, how we're going to have to like be very ready for a huge change in the kind of like touch that we have with students. Well, if we're good, maybe we can move along. I don't know if I'm still leading or not. I don't know, Grace.
Yeah, sorry. I was like, I wasn't sure if you wanted to jump in or not. But thank you. I appreciate it. We hadn't talked much about FAFSA renewal. We had the question of whether you're doing anything specific to prepare students to go home for break and perhaps like get information from parents if they haven't renewed FAFSA or anything. Did any groups have anything from that conversation that was, you think, useful to share out to the group?
I mean, we didn't talk specifically about that in our group, but I did come up with like a little sheet that I sent all of my students that was like how to do the FAFSA with your parents over winter break, essentially. The title was much catchier than that. But, you know, just kind of recommending that they like really find an afternoon over winter break when they're going to be at home with their parents and get all the documents that you think you're going to need, sit down on your couch or the dining room table and grab a snack and just buckle in, essentially, was my advice. And for most of my students, I think that's sufficient. I do have some students where, you know, parents are a little bit more reluctant with the tax information, which can be kind of its own challenge, and like having that conversation of, and then some of my students who are emancipated, so no one claims them on their taxes. The FAFSA has gotten a little complicated for those students because the previous FAFSA, they were dependents on their parents, and now this one they are not anymore. And so it doesn't work for all of my students, but certainly for those who really just kind of like need to get it done and it's not going to be much of an ordeal to get it done, that's kind of how I've been approaching it, is like just find an afternoon to just buckle down and get it done.
That's really smart, Allison. Thanks. And if you have an editable version of that doc that you think would be useful for other coaches to perhaps steal or reappropriate for their own cohort, dropping that in Slack might be helpful for some folks. And I'd also encourage you all to use Slack if you have specific student situations around FAFSA renewal that you think maybe someone else is also dealing with, or perhaps has already done some research on if you're just getting into it. So for emancipated students or for undocumented students or situations that might not come up as regularly, there's a lot of us and there's a good chance that someone else has done that research and that you don't need to do your own, or at least that you can use someone else's research to get a head start on it. So I'd really encourage you all to share those situations, like anonymized, of course, in Slack, so you can, you know, be more efficient with that. But thank you for sharing, Allison. That's great. Okay, I am going to pivot to our curriculum section today, which Jake is leading. Thank you all for that conversation. I hope it was helpful.
Thanks, Grace. All right, so like any good curriculum section, I have a PowerPoint, so I'll pull that up. Give me a second here, team. So today we are talking about community and technical colleges. So we have a couple of objectives for this. I hope we hit on them all. The first one, identify some of the differences in structures and outcomes between bachelor's granting institutions and community or technical colleges. We'll be looking at a couple of different tools that might help us facilitate conversations with the students who are considering a transfer to a community or technical college. That's, we'll talk about that later, considered a reverse transfer. And then recognizing some differences that individual students might have to help inform our own conversation and that guidance that we provide around the transfers. Cool. So before we begin, I'd like to get some input from all of you, your experiences. How many of you can just do a hand raise, virtual or in the chat, did some coursework at a community or technical college, I will raise my hand. Anybody else had some of those experiences? So I'll recognize that some of my time at the community college and some of those courses were really, really great in helping me kind of form my own path. So just recognizing that. I hope that some of you had similar experiences, maybe not. And I can see some of your faces nodding, so I'll do my best to read those. Then, how many of you have had students discuss transferring to a community or technical college, that reverse transfer? Okay, got a couple of hands. Okay, interesting. All right, good to know. So looks like this will be a useful session for at least a few of us. And again, if you have not had a student directly ask you, the idea is that you'd be prepared to deal with the conversation a little bit better and just inform your own professional development here. So I'd like some input from all of you about some of the common reasons for reverse transfer. Like, what are students saying when they're thinking about going to a community or technical college, leaving your school, moving into a community or technical college? So go ahead and type some annotations there or in the chat. If I can, whoops. Cheaper, definitely affordability. Getting some in the chat. Family demand, cost efficient, money, closer to home. Okay. Not ready for college. Okay. Getting their generals done. I'm curious if anybody's had students say that they want to go back and then get generals done and then come back to school, to the institution. Not sure what they want to major in. Great. These are all a lot of things that we definitely see.
I'd say, just to respond to you.
Yeah.
Jake, I have a student who left, wants to go to community college for a little bit and then get back on their feet and then not come back to Luther, but maybe go to another 4-year institution.
Okay, nice. That's really helpful. And maybe that's, there are probably a lot of things affecting that kind of thought process, I'm guessing. Cool. So I'm gonna clear that. Let's see. Maybe I can clear it. Thank you for your responses. Clear up. Cool. And we'll move back into this. So just a couple of stats that we have when we're thinking about community and technical college. I know it's not always about statistics and numbers, but just some things to have in the back of your mind as you're going through this with a student. Nationally, like 80% of the students who start their education at a 2-year institution say that they want to transfer to a bachelor's granting institution. And then in reality, only 29% of the students who initially enroll at a 2-year institution end up subsequently enrolling at a bachelor's granting institution. I'm trying to monitor the chat here, but
Sorry, Jake, I actually have a question.
Sure.
So I actually I did the 2 years at a community college first and then transferred.
Nice.
I'm wondering about the statistic where only 29% of students do that. Is it because they end up completing an associate's degree or because they just simply don't graduate at all?
That's a great question. I don't know exactly why. I think we could look at a couple of different numbers, but if maybe John, you know some more about that. I don't have the exact numbers. I know that a lot of them just end up going for an associate's or just simply not making that goal towards the bachelor's that they initially had planned on, whether it's for financials, time, a lot of different things.
Yeah, and just to add that in, that's a great question, Allison. My understanding of where what this data is representing is inclusive of those multiple scenarios. So it's inclusive of someone who their goal changed and their goal maybe became the associate's degree in that time without then looking to continue going on for the bachelor's degree, as well as those students who may not have been able to complete the transfer or the associate's degree. So it could include each of those scenarios.
And if anyone's interested in reading more of this, like background information of where these stats come from, I'll make sure to link the sources that Jake's showing here in the notes for today's deck session. So if you're interested in reading more about it, you'll have that option. I'll make sure those are hyperlinked there.
Thanks, Grace. And then a couple of other ones that I'd like to share with everyone. So just our own College Possible students here, looking at those. In fall 2016, 20.7% of that 2016 class had enrolled at a two-year institution. And then just overall, in terms of graduation and transfer, 15% of the students that were at a two-year institution end up earning a certificate, and 2.9% of our College Possible students end up also earning a bachelor's, whereas 16% of them ended up transferring. So a little bit of a discrepancy there. Hard to tell if the 2.9% are, are they only earning both the bachelor's and the associates, and then what's happening with those 16%? Are they actually graduating? But the fact is that based on this data, we feel pretty confident saying that a student enrolled, and this is just data, this is not looking at individual students or individual circumstances, just calling that out. But we know that from the data, it's less likely that a student will achieve a bachelor's degree when they enroll in most community or technical colleges. Any questions or comments there? Okay. So why are these outcomes so different? There are oftentimes about 3 different categories that are referenced when we think about community or technical colleges and the differences that they present between bachelor's granting institutions. That might not be the case. They might not exactly represent what your institution does or what community and technical colleges do in your area, but I just like to call them out here. So the first one is the program structure. Studies have shown that not understanding the credit process or taking courses that are outside of their direct goals to their bachelor's or directly to the associates might deter students from persisting and from graduation. And then there's also usually a kind of a large menu of options when you go to a community college. You can take pretty much anything you're interested in, but we know that research in behavioral economics shows that when we have so many options, we're worse at making decisions, and that leads to less meeting of goals and less persistence. So the other category that often is referenced is intake and support. So again, not all, but with limited resources, community colleges are less able to provide that comprehensive advising. Even your institutions having College Possible coaches on site is something that might not be afforded to all community or technical colleges. Many don't have an organized process to help them form long-term goals. It's more looking at getting you enrolled in that next semester and getting you set up. But we know that students who set these long-term goals of a bachelor's or of graduation, that we're going to have higher success rates. And if we're not focused on those, then it's not going to be as successful. Source. And then bachelor's granting institutions often foster this cohort feeling, especially smaller private colleges, but also in large state colleges as well, of I'm in here with my class, I'm working through a bachelor's degree in this time frame, and that's not always the case with a community or technical school. Developmental coursework, this one might not exactly hit some of your students, but just something to be aware of. 50% of the students in 2- and 4-year colleges take at least one remedial course or developmental coursework. That could be like an ESL class, a remedial math class, something that's not necessarily going to help them graduate, but that they'll need to do to graduate, if that makes sense. And then less than 25% of the students who began college with those remedial courses complete a degree, and 40% of them who begin without enrolling will complete a certificate. So a large difference if they have those remedial courses or not. And of course, the current system often affects African American, low-income students, students from low-income backgrounds, or Latino, Latinx students a little bit more than other students. So just keeping that in the back of your mind as well. So those are some of the statistics and some of the reasons why there's less likelihood to graduate at a community or technical college, recognizing that there are a lot of individual circumstances that might change this, and that all students have different needs and kind of different goals. So keeping that in the back of your mind as well. I have two resources here, and I'd like to take just a minute for you to use these. Let's see if I can type those in the chat for you. And these are going to help us do some quick comparisons between your school and hopefully a community or technical college in your area. And I'd recommend using this one first, the one I typed in the chat, because it's a little bit fast and simple. It gives you about three different statistics. The other one, the College Navigator, is a little bit more in-depth, but also provides some important information. So take about a minute here and look at a community or technical college in your area, and I want you to come back with like what jumps out at you, what key differences do you notice between your school and a community or technical school in your area, maybe something that you weren't aware of before using those tools. When you have it, feel free to annotate those here. Is that clear? Okay. Nice, getting some responses in the chat there. Graduation rates. What specifically did you notice there, Sharky, if I can ask?
So, like, being here at Cole and kind of just being like around here is one of the things that a lot of like students, at least that I've heard of, or just like here in like the Cedar Rapids area, is like people will kind of compare like Cole against like Kirkwood, which is like a community college, and like a lot of people like see Cole in this very prestigious way, and Kirkwood kind of has some of that like prestige as well. But like it seems like when students, if like stuff at Cole aren't going like the best for them, like the idea is like, oh, well, I can go to Kirkwood and like do better. But like just looking, just like on here comparing it, like our graduation rate here at Cole is blowing them out the water. And it's not I'm not trying to make like fun of it. Like that's not the intention. But it's just like, I don't know. To me, that's like I would think that would be a significant thing, because it says like, I would take like certain ideas like, okay, so are their professors really like caring for the students, making sure the students are graduating on time? Like what type of help are they doing it? What type of resources are being available to these students? Right. And I don't know, like now I can understand, like now I understand when students are deciding to go there because it's cheaper, but it's like, just because it's a cheaper option, does that necessarily mean it's the best option as well?
I love that. Yeah, is it the right fit for you? And getting behind those numbers, what is that school doing right to make sure, what are you guys doing right there to make sure that the students are getting through? I had some others in the chat there. The salary after attending, for sure, good thing to call out. Cost of attendance is significantly lower, but then you're gonna maybe you're not earn quite as much, or maybe not be, you know, as likely to graduate. Definitely some things to call out there. Cool. Any other things that's anybody wanted to voice before we move on? Okay. Monthly loan payments after attending. Thanks for sharing this, Anahita. This is really helpful. Useful, but not acting like it's the same, right? Yeah, I like that. Cool. So acknowledging some of those differences there, and recognizing, yeah, for each student, there's definitely needs. There are definitely unique circumstances that might affect this decision, but like Sharky called out, what is their reasoning for going there? Is it because it's the best fit for them? Or is it just because of some other issues that are coming to the foreground more significantly at this time, right? So helping students really think in that long term might be helpful there. So I don't remember what the next slide is. Individual students and experiences. So yeah, when we're forming these conversations with students, sorry, I'm reading the chat here, slide sidestep, but the amount of data missing from the for-profit institutions. Good call out, yeah, definitely. So when you're talking with students, remember to consider their current academic process and how a transfer might affect them. First year students are definitely going to have different situations than second, third, or fourth year. Who are further along in their trajectory. They've maybe selected a major. Maybe some of those credits are not going to transfer. I know all of you know this, but just making sure we call it out. And then identify the reasoning for transfer, and then what resources are available that you or your institution might be able to provide to help them. If it's something about financial aid, like Denisha said shared earlier, just helping them work through maybe some issues that might be really, really stressful and really present in their mind, and like kind of blocking that clear vision and clear sight to what their goal is will definitely be helpful long term, right? Working with students to identify their goals. Does transferring actually support those goals? And then remember that research suggests that having a clear plan and a clear expectation allows students to perform significantly better, even in the community and technical schools. So if they've really made their mind up, make sure that they have some sort of a clear plan as to how they're going to work through it, because I think that's something that we're all caring individuals, and we want the best for our coaches and for our students, for our coaches as well. But sometimes, you know, we have to kind of let them go and make their own decisions. And while we prefer a student achieve a bachelor's, it's important to respect and value their decisions and all types of different degrees. If they have goals that have maybe shifted since their time enrolling at your college or your university, then thinking about that and really taking that into consideration, but helping them work through those. So I've been talking for a lot, and I'm going to give everybody else a little bit of time here to talk with some other coaches to see how you might be able to work through some of the key messaging and questions that you might ask or might discuss with students or that are potentially transferring, or maybe students that you're already thinking about that are considering these transfers. So we're going to open up the breakout rooms, and if you have a physical copy of the Catalyze curriculum, that's great. Otherwise, Grace just dumped it in the chat there. And we're going to really be looking at the page 52 to 53. That whole section on transfer students is going to be helpful, but we're really focusing on the messaging for today's session. So are there any questions about what the task is at this point? I'm going to stop sharing. I did stop sharing. And I'm also going to dump in a link to a Google Doc here for your group, just to kind of take some notes. And then helpful for us and for other groups to kind of be able to see what you're all doing. and also helpful in a group maybe to kind of take some notes and think about what you've said. So we'll open up the breakout rooms here. Again, you're looking at page 52 to 53 in the curriculum, and then kind of taking some notes on what your messaging might be towards those students or with those students as you're working with them through that process. What kind of key points would you not want to miss out on? Is that clear? Can I get some head nods? All right, cool. Grace is going to do us a favor and open up the breakout rooms, and we'll see you. Let's see, I didn't tell you how long. I think we'll do about 12 minutes. I'm feeling like 12 minutes is a good number there. Love the notes. Sorry that there was a little bit of an issue with the sharing permissions there. I saw one note, oops, sorry, we forgot to take notes. So that's very helpful. Let's just open it up. Like, what were some things that came to mind? What were some things that you'd all like to share with the group, or you'd like maybe have some questions for any of your coaches or peers as well?
Everyone hear me? Cool. One thing that I opened up to like my group and talked about was just like, I don't necessarily always feel comfortable having these conversations because with me just being like 1 year removed from college and like basically being kind of like close in age to all these people, like I don't necessarily feel comfortable having these because it's like, who am I to decide like what's best for this? Like how am I supposed to tell you like if it's okay to transfer out or like keep you here at like the respective institution? Like I don't feel like I should be that person, like the gatekeeper for that.
Anybody else having that kind of feeling as well, that it's a difficult role to play, it's a challenge to be in that position?
Oh, for sure. And depending on the kind of relationship that you have with the student too, like didn't matter how much like, I don't know, non-biased kind of like stand you tried to take, like students at a younger age who are feeling kind of lost and unsure, like are going to like latch on to like anything that you can give them for an answer. Like I just know from experience, like it's really taxing to make decisions. So if you can have someone make it for you, and even if you didn't say like you need to do this or you should do this, like if a student latches on to like, well, that's what they think I should do, like you don't want that. I think as a coach, like we don't want that to happen. But it's really hard when you have a relationship and you're just trying to like be as objective as possible, present them options that you hope that they don't latch onto one just because they're feeling like in desperation of like trying to have something solved so it's figured out. Like people get solace from like, well, if I don't have to think about it anymore, it's fine. Like good, someone else made the decision for me, which is really scary because like I feel like once you mature and get older, you don't want people to make decisions for you. You want to have that autonomy and make those decisions yourself. So to look back, I would never want a student to look back and think like, yeah, it was my coach that pushed me to do that. And I don't know if that was like the right thing. So you just never know how a student's going to take what you say.
I think in our group, we talked less about making the decision for the student and more about letting the student know that it's a really, really deliberate decision and taking the time with the student to research the school that they're thinking about transferring to come up with like a really clear game plan of like, okay, if you know, because I was drawing from my own experience of going to Sinclair. And so, you know, in my mind, if a student said, I'm for sure going to Sinclair, I'd be like, okay, so, you know, your very first day of classes, here's where I want you to go. And here's who I want you to talk to, you know, and really taking a good hard look at how that's going to affect a student's lifestyle and coming up with some really clear direction, but then also informing the student that they should be open to the possibility that their goals may change while they're there and that that's okay. And, you know, it's much more about just making sure that you're not rushing into decisions or making decisions because they seem easiest at the moment, and just really taking the time to think about it and to really come up with a plan.
Any other groups want to share out what they discussed, or things that stood out from their conversation, or things that might not be clear or present to all of us that we think would be helpful?
I think something that stood out from our conversation that I thought was interesting that we all kind of agreed that, like, yeah, we don't want to make the decision for the student, but we do want to make sure they have some sort of direction and like know their plan, and just like talk with them about their goals so that they're ready for whatever they have next coming. So, yeah.
Any other thoughts or follow-up? If not, I'll share one last slide that we have for this section, just to kind of wrap things up. And again, if anything comes up during this time here, feel free to voice those. So again, like kind of acknowledging that you have a unique role at College Possible. You have kind of a dual role. Your role is, you know, partially accountable to College Possible, but then also to your institution. So that definitely creates a unique space. So letting students know that you are where you are, and trying to provide that accurate or unbiased information as much as possible, and letting those students kind of make their own informed decision is important. Being honest and transparent about your relationship there. Also, like reiterating the reasons that we prefer a bachelor's degree at College Possible, while not really like looking down on students that might be considering transferring to a technical college for other reasons. You know, recognizing that those degrees also have value. You know, the way we think about things here at College Possible is just looking at the data. We know that it's more likely to happen if students are in a bachelor's granting institution, and then that difference in like overall income over the lifetime, you know, that $1 million, if you want to put it in like an economic sense, is another way of thinking about that as well. Ultimately, remembering that these transfer decisions are up to the student and their family. However, College Possible will only be able to support flagship students that transfer to other schools. So reminding students that if they are Catalyze students, the relationship or the support that they'd be receiving from you as a coach is not something that would be transferring as well along with them. Although I'm sure that, you know, it's hard to leave students. You know, in my role as bicultural liaison, I couldn't leave them when they went to another district. So recognizing that might happen as well. And just through conversations I've had with staff here at College Possible, it seems like we sit on two different sides of the fence often, and they both come from a really, I think, a really good way of thinking about things. This unconditional support that, you know, I'm going to support you in whatever decision you make because it's your decision and you know what's best for you. Or that other side that, you know, research shows and economics show that you're better to succeed here. So I'm not going to encourage you to make that decision to go to another school because I know that because of the data, it's not going to be helpful. So I think that our hope is that you can play kind of both of these roles, straddling that fence and being able to support students to make their own informed decisions there, and not, you know, necessarily falling into one of those categories or the other. Yeah, and I'll try and look at some of these chats. I like what I'm seeing there. Nice, Devante. Cool. So I hope that this was an informative session for all of you. I also would encourage you to take some time to dig into that curriculum piece, to look at those tools. And also to connect with each other on Slack if you're experiencing these kind of situations that are challenging. You have a whole slew of peers in the field that are dealing with similar situations. So let's lean on each other and remember that we're not there on an island. We're all here in it together. Cool. Any follow-up, any final thoughts before we move on? Thanks for those chat messages, Devante, Anahita. It's really helpful. Well, so I will wrap things up here, and I think we have a little bit of information coming from John, so I'll turn it over to him. Thanks, everyone.
Hi again, everybody. So for the last section that we have on the agenda, as you'd see, we wanted to spend some time sharing results. You've heard throughout the year, starting from kickoff and then periodically since then about with College Possible, we very much see ourselves as a results-driven organization because we know that the results that we're focused on are our students and their outcomes, their successes and the challenges that they're working to get through. So we have a couple pieces here that I wanted to shine some light on today. One is that we just recently, after going through kind of a data share partnership process with our cohort 1 schools, our Minnesota schools, we've been able to confirm all the elements of the program performance for this past year, the 2017-2018 year. And this is something that we wanted to provide an opportunity for you to be familiar with how the program that you are such a vital part of has been performing. Certainly some of you were coaches last year and so might have a lens on this, having been a part of the team at this stage. Even those of you who are new to the team this year, though, I think would want, hopefully, to have a line of sight to this, as it's something that this is representative of what the program that you are such an important part of is achieving with students in the program. So I'll be doing a kind of a high-level overview of that, and also just as a preview, we'll be going more in depth with some additional time on that piece at our mid-year retreat, where we'll have some opportunity for some live, robust conversation about what we're seeing in the data from last year's program outcomes and what we are learning from it and what ideas are out there that we could be employing from it. So that's the first piece we'll look at. We'll look at last year's year-end results, and then I also have some data I want to walk through for wrapping up the fall campaign that we're all a part of so far this year to reflect all that's been accomplished and some points to highlight looking ahead. So that's what I have in mind. Wanted to give voice to that, but now I will go ahead and share my screen with a bit of a slide deck so that those who benefit from seeing this visually have that opportunity. And as I aim to say at all the times that I'm presenting some information, feel free to jump in with any questions or points that are catching your attention as we're going through. So starting off with the last year-end results. Here are some of the summary points I wanted to share out in this high-level summary today. So we know how focused you are on making those connections with your students, having the successful interactions. That's part of a coach's day-to-day emphasis. Last year, as we reflect on the totality of the year, we saw an average of 5.8, so nearly 6 successful interactions between a coach and each one of their students. And it's a higher rate. We track it uniquely for first-year students too, and we see nearly 8 interactions on average with first-year students. So those are kind of those leading indicators that we think about, that the amount of connections that coaches and students are having oftentimes can lead towards strong results for students and their retention, their persistence that build from there. You'll see here an average of 2.9, nearly 3 in-person interactions specifically between each student and their coach, and just over 4 in-person interactions for first-year students with their coach. Also, some of these high-level pieces, these are now moving from some of the leading indicators to some of the really big indicators that we're hoping to accomplish in a given year. One being the retention. So you've heard us talk about retention. You've probably had conversations about retention with your supervisors, with your teams on campus, where this is one of the biggest things that we can impact as a team for students in a given year. If students stay on track to progress towards their degree in that year from one year to the next. So you'll see here that overall the fall-to-fall retention rate, so that's from the fall of 2017 to this fall 2018, saw 76.3% of students retained. So staying, and just to clarify, retention is staying at that same institution that they were enrolled at. As we've been trying to understand how the performance for the program and students in the program is in the context that it's a part of, one of the pieces that we have is efforts to have a meaningful comparison group. And so knowing that the bulk of our students are coming from income backgrounds that would match Pell eligibility, the Pell eligible group of students out of school has been our comparison group as a point of reference. We see that students who have been receiving the kind of coaching that you all are providing to your students have been retained, have stayed in school and made progress towards a degree at a higher rate than those who haven't had access to that same coaching that you're providing by 8 percentage points. That's really huge. That's one of the things that to me is a big spotlight about the kind of impact that the effort that you all are putting in with your students daily is able to contribute towards student success. I know that within Catalyze conversations with supervisors at your school, with partnership champions, most often, to be transparent, I know those conversations center around the retention, where the school certainly does have an interest in helping students be successful continuing at their individual institution. It's also meaningful, of course, for us to look more broadly than that. Not just at retention, but persistence. If you're not familiar with the distinction there, persistence would refer to students continuing to progress, staying in school, but it is inclusive of students who have transferred to another school who are continuing to progress towards their degree. So you'll see here that when we look at overall fall-to-fall persistence for students in the program last year, it's even higher at 83.5%. So just about 7 percentage points higher. So 7% of students continuing to progress, though it made sense for them to transfer to a new school. And then one of the things that really caught my attention that I wanted to share in this high-level overview of the program this past year is that in addition to looking at the Pell comparison group, when we look overall at the retention rates for students as compared to the overall retention rate across all income levels, 2 out of our 3 schools this past year even saw college possible students retained at a higher rate than the overall student body, regardless of income background. Again, is a really strong indicator that the kind of coaching that students are receiving from coaches like you is making an impact, a meaningful impact on their success. And so in a lot of ways, we talk about efforts with College Possible and in general education equity work, trying to level the playing field, so to speak. This is the kind of indicator that is really encouraging to me and hopefully to you as well, that the kind of work that we're all engaged in is helping to level the playing field in some meaningful ways. There's still more work to do. As in each of these statistics, we can look at the successes. We can also pay attention to, okay, let's also learn about the students who were not retained. What can we do better next time for supporting students who are in those kinds of situations? We look at both sides of data like this, but wanted to make sure to highlight some of these high-level points with you about this past year. Before I jump into this year's data, I did just want to pause in case there are any initial questions or reactions people have to what we walked through from last year's data. I'll call it out. If you don't have initial things today, that is just fine. As I mentioned, we're intending that I believe Kendra and I will be co-presenting a more in-depth look at the year's this past year's program results at the mid-year retreat, and really hoping for some robust conversation with all of you about that. Right, so not seeing any questions right now, I will go ahead and share my screen again to show you the next part that I want to make sure that we're able to take a look at together today. And so that is looking at this year so far. So for the fall 2018 campaign highlights. So here we'll be looking at a lot of leading indicators and how they connect in a way. So I know that oftentimes the conversations that you all are likely having related to outcomes and leading indicators and results with your students are either on the individual basis of you as a coach and your portfolio, or perhaps with your supervisor as a team basis of what your team of coaches at your school are achieving. What I have here to share with you is the aggregate across all Catalyze campuses this year, because In addition to being able to hone in on your individual impact, I think it's really meaningful, at least from my perspective, to be able to consider what's the breadth of impact? How broad is this impact that we as a team are making? So a lot of high-level points called out here. Overall, this year, we've been supporting a maximum of 1,535 students. That has fluctuated, of course, as we've learned of students' new situations, but that has peaked at 1,535. With those students, we've seen over 4,000, over 4,300 total activities recorded. So that includes both the attempted and the successful. That is a ton of coaching activities. And in case you're curious, having crunched the numbers, that's an average of 2.8 attempted and successful activities per student that we have in the program. Honing in even further from there, not looking at attempted and successful, but just successful, we see just over 3,000 successful activities with the students in the program this year. And so that average of 2 per student so far. And then even more detailed from that, just over 1,100 campaign coaching sessions specifically. So really those dedicated, focused, forward-thinking coaching conversations that we've seen so correlated within the program with students being more likely to persist in college towards the next semester.
Okay, John, can I hop in quick?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we go back. Just want to call out the 1,100 are unique students. So of those 3,000 total successful activities, a lot of those were campaign coaching sessions, but 1,100 with unique students.
Perfect. Thank you for confirming that, Devin. I appreciate that. So 1,100 unique students with campaign coaching sessions. That's awesome. Okay. All right. So then going ahead, I also wanted to acknowledge the progress that the team has made so far on 2 major milestones. So spring registration, we have seen recorded so far during the fall campaign, 526 students who've registered for spring as a really strong indicator that they're on track to come back for next semester. And I know that there's been active work since the fall campaign closed to continue seeing more and more students register for spring so that they'll be in good standing too. And then financial aid renewal, certainly a very long campaign that we're working towards this year. It's a long window of time that students have the opportunity to complete financial aid. And at the time that we close the fall campaign, 178 students have renewed their financial aid applications so far. So with those, all those leading indicators, also wanted to highlight some of the big pieces that we've been focused on in the fall campaign. We had the goal of 90% of students having a campaign coaching session via all methods in the fall campaign, and we were able to achieve seeing 78% of students having that campaign coaching session. So that's a lot of our students who have had that critical connection, and it relates to that figure that Devin just gave voice to of the 1,100 individuals. Still, there are students left on the table, though, that we're actively working to try and make those connections with. And you know better than anyone what are the circumstances that are proving challenging for students to be able to reach back to you to hold those conversations. But they remain some of the students that we'll continue to focus on. And then, although we didn't have a tracked goal for the voice-to-voice campaign coaching, I thought it's helpful to see that that vast majority of the students who had campaign coaching sessions this fall are voice-to-voice as well. So whereas 78% had a session of some method, 68%, so just a difference of 10, had it through voice-to-voice connections as well. So being able to get perhaps more in depth through that voice-to-voice connection. And we see here that as of the time that we finished up the fall campaign, we had 281 students who have yet to engage in a campaign coaching session. So those being among those that would be likely for these priority coaching weeks. And seeing that if it was equal across all coaches, that would be about 17 or 18 students per coach that we're still focused on. But certainly knowing that that varies greatly from campus to campus and the circumstances going into trying to connect with those students and have them connect back with you. I also wanted to call our gaze to the current moment. So in addition to the snapshot of where we ended the fall campaign, you're right now in the heart of these priority coaching weeks to wrap up the semester with a primary goal. We're hoping to see 90% of our students in a persistence category of 1 or 2, indicating that they're in really good standing, that they're likely to persist and stay in school for next semester. So I know that the way that we have dashboards set up, it doesn't easily show you the percentages. Hopefully you're in the habit of kind of running your own percentages in a way, but if you're not, this is what it looks like on the aggregate. If you kind of click into that dashboard, that part of the dashboard, and look at the report, it shows you a table of each coach for that you would have access to, and how many students are in each category. As a team, we see that the largest category for us is category 1, which is awesome. We have just over 45% of our students who you have identified are in really good standing to persist to next semester, and another 17% who are in category 2. So overall, that's having us see that 62.2% of our students right now are in those really good categories that we're encouraged to think about their likelihood of staying in school for next semester. There are still students, of course, to focus on, with 17% and 11.5% in categories 3 and 4 respectively. Those being students to really hone in on with these this remaining time in priority coaching weeks, as I imagine you are already, with hopes that we're able to convert those student situations to the category 1 or 2. If we kind of crunch the numbers a little bit, if all the 3s and 4s move to become 1s and 2s, we would just meet that goal of 90% of students being in that good standing to be able to stay in school and progress towards their degree next semester. Category 5 is recorded here as well. As we know, that was the default category that all students were set to as we transitioned to these standard persistence categories. So at this time, trusting that if a student isn't a 5, that's because they're supposed to be. And we have 129 students, it sounds like, who for individual reasons have determined that they would not be back next semester. As you look at your own students, if that doesn't look right to you, make sure that you're making those updates. But otherwise, it sounds as though we're projecting that that group of students would not be back next semester. So overall, I wanted to call out some major takeaways from what we've looked at here so far. Big point is that as a team, this team has made a lot of collective impact with a ton of students so far this year. I also wanted to underscore the fact that the goals that we're tracking together can be the difference between student success and the challenges that they might encounter. I know that it's probably, I'd say for many of us, perhaps one of the less intuitive parts of a coaching role to be recording the data, right? Because it's more about, there's more drive for the engaging with the human being. But really just want to underscore how keeping up with the Salesforce updates is so vital to support you in your own coaching, so that we can help make sure that for you and your team that you continue to be able to maximize the opportunities that you have to support your students. You'll see the final point called out here that we're aiming as a team to dedicate some more ongoing attention to ensure that as a results-driven team and organization that we are keeping up with where we stand as a team, as this aggregate set of information. So in addition to some of the data-driven conversations that we know that you'd be having with your supervisor one-on-one and with your team on campus, we'll be looking to be more intentional to dedicate some time here in Ducks for future weeks as well, so we can make sure that we're being supportive of you and the goals that you're working towards with your students too. So apologies that was a lot of me talking at you. I know I always aim to avoid that, but when going through a lot of information, I wanted to make sure that you at least had the opportunity to be familiar with these headlines. And I know that we are just past 11, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I guess my ask to you is, if you have follow-up questions, thoughts on any of these points, feel free to reach out to me and let me know, or to reach out to your program advisor and let them know, because we welcome these conversations. I just apologize I didn't leave enough time for some of that right now. That was the last piece that we have on the agenda for today. I know that Devin had an interest in connecting briefly with the UC coaches, just to talk about some logistics of travel for the retreat, I believe. So as we're wrapping up, UC coaches, if you are able to hang on for just a minute to connect with Devin, I'd appreciate that. And anything else, Grace, before we wrap up?
Yeah, and a quick reminder that for our coaching skills session on Friday, you all signed up for hour-long time slots within that 3-hour session. So I'm going to run through those real quick. It's also in the weekly update email if you need to review that. But as a reminder, the 9 to 10 slot, this is all Central Time, is Marcella, Dobby, Daniel, Sharky, Niat. The 10:15 to 11:15 slot is Devon Alex Kersha, and the 11:30 to 12:30 slot is Denisha, Anahita, Alana, Allison, Jenny, Dow. Let us know if anything changes, but otherwise, Kristen will be expecting you in that time slot. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day. And again, Cincy coaches, hang on for a minute, please.
Hey, can I put in one final shameless plug for cleaning up your persistence category report? So last week we took a look at that and just making sure that the check boxes align with the category that they're assigned. And if not, maybe some milestone updates need to happen. If you have questions on what that means, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Happy to set up some time to work through that and make sure that everything's looking good.